Let's see if we can get this right today. I actually recorded a whole video today without ever hitting the record button. So hopefully this is gonna work. Hey there, did you know you need joy in your life? Especially if you're going through a difficult situation. Today, I can't wait to share with you how a stuffy, a notebook, and a movie helped me and my children get through one of the hardest winters of our life. Did you know that when you smile, even when you don't feel like it, you release the same happy chemicals, endorphins, and all those good things in your body just by smiling? And that joy is so important, especially if you're facing any kind of change or any kind of stress in your life. Hey there, I'm Jennifer Lynn Wales. I help women just like you bounce back and overcome. So before I get into my story about how we use three things to bring joy into our life and get us through a really cold, dark, lonely Canadian winter, I would just like to ask a tiny little thing of you. Could you go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel? I do these videos not because I want to relive all the painful moments in my life. I do this because I want to help women have the courage and the tools and the inspiration to be able to make change in their own life. And by you subscribing, thank you, by the way, you help me reach more women to do just that. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so I don't know what situation that you're facing, or maybe you're just come out of a crisis, or maybe who knows, next week you're headed into a new one. Either way, I wanted to share a couple of things with you that really helped us. Okay, so let me set the scene for you so you can understand how these things became important in our life. So I had just come out of the shelter, and based on the advice from the lawyer there, she said you had to go live back home. But nothing had been finalized in the courts about my family situation. There was no support set up. There's just nothing. We were kind of just in limbo. What that meant was, because my ex had no legal obligation to do anything for us, the power was shut off at my house, and we had nothing to be able to heat the home or to have proper, power and lights and things like that on at the house. What did happen was they put a regulator on our utilities to the home so that it had just enough so that the pipes wouldn't burst. So we weren't completely freezing, but we were by no means properly warm, and we certainly could not just flick on lights. Once the home used enough power to just maintain that really low level of making sure pipes don't freeze, the power shut off, and we couldn't flip on a light switch. You couldn't use the stove. The fridge turned off. Nothing happened because the furnace is initiated by a power switch. The furnace didn't work. So it was a pretty challenging situation and a very long, cold, and dark winter. The other thing that was going on at this time, I lived in a small town on the outskirts of a small town, and gas at the time was the most expensive I have ever seen it in my life. So to put gas in my van to get it anywhere, it cost more than it ever has before this time and since that time in my life. And because my kids were so traumatized by all the events that had happened in our life, they absolutely refused to take the bus to school. So I had to have enough gas to be able to drive them all the way around and get them to school and then pick them back up and bring them home. So it was a very harsh way and a harsh time in our life with all of this stuff going on. So there were a couple of things that I found myself doing, not really because I had any like formal education or formal, instruction around this. There are three things I want to share with you today that I ended up doing that really helped my mental, emotional, and physical state of being going through this process, because the Canadian winters are long. This wasn't like a month. This was month after month after month of it being like this. And so one of the things that I found, I had a laptop at the time, and I would bring it to the local cafe on my way home from school, from dropping the kids off to school in the morning, and I would charge my laptop at the cafe. Now, a side part of my story, it was quite a public thing that happened. So most people in my town knew who I was and knew what I was going through. And so I think they allowed me to do some things because of that, that maybe other people wouldn't have been able to do. Like I could go sit in the cafe, plug in my computer, and not always buy a coffee. Because let's face it, that's a luxury, and I couldn't do that. But when I charged my computer later on at home, especially at night when my kids were in bed, I found myself perpetually watching this movie, The Pursuit of Happiness. And I was specifically drawn to this movie. And I'm not kidding, not joking. I've probably watched this movie literally hundreds of times. It was like constantly playing on my laptop in the kitchen. And what I found by watching this particular story was, first, it's based on a true story. And I could see in the time of the movie, so the amount of time it took from beginning, middle, and end, I could see him move from the problem in his life to the thick of dealing with it, his story of being in a shelter and being homeless. And then at the very end, all of the education that he goes through and the success that he has. And to know that it was a true story, it gave me hope. It really brought hope to me. I could identify in so many levels with the struggles that he went through. Now, in the real story of Chris Gardner, when he was going through what they show in the movie, his little one was actually a baby. But for the sake of the audience watching this movie, they made his son, a younger kid, and so the age of his boy portrayed in the movie was close to the ages of my kids at the time. And so I found myself talking to them and doing similar things, and I could just identify with the story so much. And the fact that I could see him move from the beginning, the middle, all the way to the end, it gave me hope. And I can't say that I watched a whole lot now, a decade past all of this, but I do know that in that time, even though it's awful, really, some of the things that he had to go through. And now it's almost painful for me to watch it. But at the time, it was really powerful to see him go through it and go through it. And I think it was just this constant, like, I'm going to make it through it. I'm going to make it through it. So if you're in a really tough spot, or you're just emotionally having a difficult time dealing with whatever it is, find a movie that inspires you, that gives you hope, that lifts you up, that you can watch. And I mean, I watched this thing over and over, but this was one thing that I did at that time. And that movie still has a really special place in my heart. The next thing that I was doing was I was journaling way better than I ever have at any other time in my life. Don't ask me where the actual journal is. We have moved so many times since then. I'm not quite sure. It's in a box under my stairs. But what I was doing at the end of every day was writing down at least 3 things that I was grateful for, at least 3. I tried to get to 10. And even when I still do nightly prayers with my kids, they still take turns saying and thanking God for the top 3 things that they are thankful and grateful for. And I started that with my kids way before even the situation that I'm talking about in this video. It's just something we have always done. And so I kept every day at the end of my day writing out things that I was grateful for, things that I could thank God for, even if they were the same things. And even if they were, I had to really grasp and try to, how can you be thankful for even the roof over your head when the roof over your head doesn't keep you warm, doesn't have any lights? It was like I had to dig for things that I was grateful for. I'm not saying I wasn't grateful for my house. I was still grateful we had a home, and that part was good. I was no longer living in a shelter and being homeless. Yes, the other part that's kind of cool is a few years later, my husband actually met the real Chris Gardner. He actually signed this book for my husband. So it's cool. It's really, really helped me to know that there it was real. I needed that. I just needed that in my life. Maybe the movie that you find inspirational isn't necessarily a true story. I don't think that that's the point. The point is it just lifted my mood and gave me hope and helped me get through. So whatever that is for you, as long as it does those things, you're on the right track. Okay, the other thing that we did now, when we lived with my ex, things were very reserved, and anything outside of his comfort zone was absolutely taboo. Could not do that. And now that we no longer had the oppression in our home, I found ourselves doing things like we would have stuffy wars. This is Otto. Otto is an otter. And actually, Otto just came on a weekend little trip that we had. And it was so funny because at the end of the trip, I was cleaning up the hotel room, and I found Otto in my son's. We had a room with two queen beds. So the bed that he was sleeping in, Otto was tucked under the pillow in the hotel bed. And my son is now almost 19 years old, and Otto still came with us. So he'll be totally embarrassed if he knows I shared that. But what we did was, they had a lot of stuffies at the time. My kids were both like under the age of 8 for sure. They're 3 years apart. I think they were 6 and 3. And so one of the things that we did is we had these things called stuffy wars, where we would end up running around the house throwing stuffies at each other. I don't remember how anybody won that game or how we decided, but it was just, I remember a ton of fun. It was kind of like tag with stuffies. So if you got hit with the stuffy, it was like a point for the other team. And I just remember us running around the house and we were throwing stuffies at each other. It were loud, they're boys, they're like screeching, and we just had this fun. The permission to be able to do something fun was so refreshing for us. And with them being little, it just happened to be this stuffy war thing that we had. Otto actually at the beginning of this tradition, he was not even in our life yet, but he's here now. We got him after we moved to Ontario. He's dearly loved. That's why you can see he's very worn. But purposeful fun, that is something that our family did. And I'm going to talk about that more as I talk about after we moved across the country, because there were certain possibilities that came up then because of the environment we moved into that I didn't know ahead of time, that allowed us to have purposeful fun. And that brought joy, and it broke the seriousness of what was going on. And it provided us a fun escape, a healthy escape. The boys got to run around and have a good time. I got to have a good time with my kids. It was a positive interaction between, the adults and the kids. And it was a time where, it was a safe activity in the sense that they were little, they couldn't wing these things very hard. So it was a ton of fun and totally enjoyable. So those are the 3 things that I did. I perpetually watched that movie. I wrote down every day what I was grateful for, and we had fun on purpose. So I don't know what you're going through, or if you have a friend who's going through something, send her this video. Maybe she'll have a little laugh at my friend Otto here. And I hope that these little tips help and that you can implement them into your life. When you do, leave a comment below. I would love to know how you broke free or just broke out of the funk maybe that you're in one of these things that worked for us. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate that you're here. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to me that you're here watching.